Hey guys, wanted to speak a little bit on, I don't know how long this is going to take, but speak a little bit on the trans issue. And in the background, I have Piers Morgan. He's interviewing I don't know if she's been nominated or she's a gubernatorial candidate for the state of California. And one of Piers Morgan's big things is that he likes to question people and grill people on the transgender issue. He'll often cite the boxer, the boxer who competed in the Olympics, and how that's unfair, and Leah Thomas, and all of these type of things. But one of his big gotcha moments is to get candidates to take a stand on this controversial issue that's also pretty niche as well. So he's questioning this woman on her stance on trans issues and whether or not she's okay with trans people competing in sport. And she's having a hard time with it. She's stumbling. This is Katie Porter now. When he was on Piers Morgan, asked her the same question, but um, this lady was struggling. She was having a hard time sticking to a position on trans. And so Piers's position, and I think this is the overwhelming majority of position of people in America, at least in the States, at least, is that they're not okay with a trans woman competing in sport with a biological woman. And often what they'll cite is the biological difference, the differences in endocrinology, the difference in androgenic hormone levels and sex hormone levels, the ratios of these things and the like. And so Piers is asking this woman, why, or do you believe that there should be a separation of the sexes in sports? And she's kind of waffling. She is trying to be fair. She wants to be inclusive, which is a beautiful position to have, to be inclusive, to be fair, to not have anyone be left out. But he's cornering her and he's pressuring her and he's asking her, so do you want them? Do you feel like a trans woman should compete in sport? And her answer is, well, I want everybody to be inclusive. There's some things that we need to figure out. And he's essentially saying there's nothing that we need to figure out. Men are biologically stronger. They have more testosterone, bone density, lung capacity. This is a no-brainer. And at some point in this, she concedes. She bites the bullet and says, yeah, I think if we find out some information, I would be open to trans people competing with trans women, because he only focuses on women in this, trans women competing with biological women. And he has this gotcha moment with this woman, where he got her to essentially say that she's not totally opposed and wants to vomit at the idea of a trans woman competing with a biological woman. And my take on this is as follows. In this type of debate, the question that's posed to the person who's not staunchly opposed to trans folks is, you know, why is it okay for someone who's biologically born a male to compete with someone who's biologically born a female? Because, as we know, one day someone wakes up and they just decide to be female. So then they'll often say, so me as a man, if one day I decide to be a female, should I go compete against people in swimming or in boxing? Or would you let your daughter compete against a trans woman in boxing? And oftentimes, the people who want to be inclusive, they'll either not answer it, or they'll be like this lady here and waffle back and forth and bite the bullet, and then they'll say, "Oh my God, how are you really saying that trans people can compete in sport with biological women?" And my take on it is this: I actually agree with Piers Morgan. I'm not okay with a trans person competing with a trans woman competing with a biological woman in sport. I wouldn't be okay. If I had a daughter, I would not want her to compete against a trans woman in boxing and wrestling. If her scholarship depended on track and field or volleyball, and swimming and fencing, and high jump, um, and gymnastics, I wouldn't want that. The overwhelming majority of sports, I wouldn't want my biological daughter competing against a biological male. But my reasoning is not because of testosterone levels or lung capacity or sex hormone ratios. Because, in fact, when males compete against each other, when two biological males compete against each other, that's essentially what we're testing. Sport in general is we are their genetic makeups are competing against each other. Because when a 15-year-old goes to play football, they're not testing their neck circumference or their lung capacity. They're just saying all these little boys, with boy anatomy compete against each other. And we're not dumb enough to think that every single male has the same amount of testosterone. This is just a fair playing field, and the guy who works the hardest is going to win. We understand that there are biological and genetic advantages intra-sex, intra-gender. The reason why Mike Tyson used to knock everybody out, or we can say the reason why Floyd Mayweather went undefeated, is because he has some genetic and biological gifts in addition to his hard work. All boxers work hard, but he has some genetic and biological gifts that allow him to see punches better, that allow him to take punches better, that allow his feet to move faster. And this has nothing to do with him being a male because he's only beating males. This is why in sports, there's odds. This guy's a 15 to 1 underdog. This guy's an 18 to 1 underdog. Why are there these big odds in sports? We didn't go and see, well, this guy is a 20 to 1 underdog because I saw he worked harder. No, we understand that in sport, intra-sex, intra-gender, there are genetic advantages. And this is what we're testing in sports. So the argument that someone says, well, I wouldn't want a trans woman to compete with a biological woman because of the genetic advantages, that doesn't hold any weight. Because when it's two men, that's what we're challenging, genetic advantages. When it's two women, that's what we're challenging it. It's genetic advantage. The testosterone to estrogen ratio isn't measured on every single athlete from Pee Wee to the Olympics. We don't care about that when it's two men. We don't care about that when it's two women. I guarantee you that the woman who won the 100 meters uh, event in the Olympics, I guarantee you her testosterone and estrogen ratio is not the same as the woman who got last place in that finals event. So when it comes to intra-sex, we don't care about it. So when it comes to transgender, we pretend like we do. Because if we're so outraged that, oh my God, this trans woman has so much more testosterone than this biological woman. I'm aghast. This is terrible. How could they ever compete? But how come we don't care when it's two men? I guarantee you the torso to leg ratio of Usain Bolt, the torso to arm ratio of Michael Phelps, it is genetically better than all the men that they were beating. But how come we didn't care then? And how come I care? So the reason why I care is because we just, as a society, we just have not accepted the fact that we're not comfortable with, in sport, with a, a penis competing against a vagina. We're just not comfortable with that. Again, it has nothing to do with genetic factors or testosterone levels because we don't care when it's two men. In fact, this is how we separate first place from second place from gold medal, from the gold medal. What we're concerned about really is that we just want two penises competing against each other. What we want is two vaginas competing against each other. And so do I. I understand that. We're not evolved enough as a society to accept the potential risks of transgender folks competing against biological folks in sport. An example of this, a comparison of this, not an equation, a comparison of this would be the way that we've treated alcohol. At one point, alcohol was illegal for various reasons. And some people still do think alcohol should be illegal now. But we know that there's negative outcomes of the selling and the consumption of alcohol. Fetal alcohol syndrome, drunk driving, domestic abuse, suicide, uh, gun fatalities, people getting their license suspended, people losing their jobs, families getting broken up. This is a direct increase of cancer, dehydration, organ failure, liver cirrhosis. This is a direct correlation to alcohol consumption. These are negative outcomes. But as a society, we thought it was illegal, but then at some point we're like, we're willing to accept the risks of this and sell it and make money off of it and advertise it and let our children drive past places where this is sold. We even romanticize it with wine. We even understand that this is a way for people to interact sexually or to increase intimacy or to decrease their inhibitions. This is often the key component in when people have sexual intercourse and have children that they didn't want. That's another negative component. A lot of babies were born, at the end of a 40 bottle or at the end of a cognac or a White Claw. But as a society, we've accepted the obvious and correlative outcomes of alcohol consumption generationally because of money, because of, well, it's okay, you have your own choice, this is what you want to do. So as a society, we have done that. We just haven't done that with the transgender issue yet. There are some potential negative outcomes of a trans person competing against a trans woman competing against biological women. The trans woman could always win. That's a negative outcome. If it's wrestling or boxing or a physical sport, the trans woman would always win. That's a negative outcome. We just haven't accepted that as a society, the way we have with alcohol, which we know have much more deleterious effects than a trans person swimming. So again, I agree with Piers, but the reasoning is weak. The reasoning is fallacious. We just need to be honest and say we're just not okay with penises competing against vaginas because we don't care about the genetic things because that's what we cheer on. This is what we're testing every time a male competes against a male, every time a female competes against a female. We understand that hard work is put into this, but if you're an Olympic athlete, if you're a Division One competitor, you work hard. You work hard. So what separates the cream of the crop from the middle of the crop? What's separating first place from fourth place? There's a genetic component. There's a biological component. There's a testosterone to estrogen ratio component. There's a lung capacity component. There's a bone density component that we don't measure and that we don't care about. So let's not pretend that we care about it when it's a trans person doing it. Let's just admit to ourselves that as a society, we are not okay with penises competing against vaginas. But as a society, we're okay to accept all the negative effects of drinking alcohol. And we know that this is negative for our society as a whole. And we know that it affects generations of people. But on the trans, we're not willing to accept something that is going to affect, I'm being ultra generous, 5% of the population. And even if it affected the same percentage of people, which we know it doesn't, one is way more harmful than the other. So just something to think about. It's a debate point. Really haven't heard anybody contrast that point. But yeah, again, I wouldn't want my daughter competing against a trans person in sport because they might not get the scholarship, they might get hurt. But if I'm honest with myself, I just haven't accepted the fact that this person was born with a penis and they might be hitting or running or skating or jumping against my daughter who has a vagina. So, what do you guys think? Comment about it. I want an open discussion. Send this over to Piers. Use this in your next trans debate and see how it goes. I'll catch you guys next time.